Teachers of Reddit, what is the weirdest excuse you've ever heard that turned out to be true? We had a kid in our class who was pure chaos. Came late all the time, forgot stuff, didn't do his homework, disruptive in class. You get the picture. One day he came to school over 2 hours late and said the bus he was on fell into a sinkhole. Everybody was like, yeah, right, until the news came in that there had indeed been a sinkhole from a tunnel construction and that indeed a bus had slipped into it. We never found out whether our classmate had actually been in it, but he swore he was. I had a 6th grader come into class very sleepy during test day. I asked her why and she said she is sleeping next to her dead grandma in the living room and has been too scared to sleep. I asked her parents about this. Turns out it's a cultural practice of theirs to keep a dead relative in the home for a few days while their spirit makes its journey to the afterlife. To answer some of your questions, she was from a large Hmong family that lived in a small apartment. She also mentioned before the grandmother passed her family attached bells to the grandmother's clothing to scare away the spirits that were making her sick. Okay, that's enough Reddit for today. Me, the teacher, didn't make cookies for the last day of school before finals as promised because a car drove into my house and they cut off my gas line to check for leaks. I pulled up the local news article as evidence. A teacher at our school promised to make cookies the last day of school, but his baby was born the night before. That was freshman year. It is senior year now, and the teacher still gets asked about the cookies. My pet rats dragged my history homework into their cage and modified it to fit in with the aesthetic of their shredded paper nest. I told the teacher the next day, who didn't believe me until I could get my dad to vouch for me. Teach was all well if she wasn't lying. Why didn't she bring the remainder in as proof? My dad, because the papers were shredded and covered in rat urine. I teach, had pet rats in the classroom, and totally believe you. I've had a few. I'll be 2 weeks late for class because I'll be in Beijing at the Olympics. My father was murdered. I was deported last night. I was a student. It was the first day of school. There were 6 of us who were late. The reason? The school bus stop was moved to a new location. We all piled into my mother's car. We went to the principal's office. The office manager said notice letters were sent to us, so she checked her log. The notices were never sent out. See, it says right here the notices were sent out on date pending. My bio teacher told me this story. During a biology lesson they were outside. My school is near a small lake. A student ended up falling in and getting their legs stuck in the mud. The bio teacher had to rescue them and hose them off behind the school. The next period teacher didn't believe them despite the student being soaking wet. I didn't come to school because I was in Mexico at my hypnotist. Yeah, didn't think one would take a day trip to Mexico for a hypnotist and be back the next day, but that was in fact what had happened. Not a teacher, but I'm from a small town, and one day like half of my high school was late because a senior decided on his last day he was going to ride his ride-on lawnmower to school. In cut-off Daisy Dukes and a cowboy hat. There's one main access road to the school. He backed crap up for like half an hour between buses and cars. You won't be surprised to know that he goes by the nickname Bubba. Every Friday of his senior year, Joey drove his John Deere to school. I don't believe that they still use that one for working, but it made a 30-mile round trip once a week. One of the girls I know from uni works in a college. Here, college is a name for vocational school, and one of her groups of students jokingly said they died when someone was absent from classes. So one day it went morbidly wrong when she asked why. Say, Dave was absent. The group replied that he died. She laughed and said okay, but seriously, and the class was just silent. I had a student miss class because one of his co-workers at his job had been arrested for child pornography and management needed him to cover the shift the guy was supposed to work before he was arrested. The student brought in proof too, thankfully not in the form of CP. I gave this one. I was in college. I went back to my house between classes only to find my roommates barricaded inside by police. Why, you might ask? There was a bull moose in our side yard and the fish and game people were very concerned. so my lab isn't until 3 or something, and meanwhile there's like 8 officers having a standoff with a moose in my yard. This continues until someone decides that the moose is an imminent threat and they're going to try to tranquilize it. So they try that and it fails. So now they're going to kill the moose. It gets to be about 2:45 and I need to leave for my class, and I'm summarily informed by the armed officer that my lawn is not safe and I'm to stay inside. So I emailed my prof and was like, look, I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm barricaded in my house and they won't let me leave. I assume this will be on the news tonight. Turns out it was on the news. They interviewed me, and I got an exemption on that lab. He told me later that he was going to 100% fail me because it was the worst excuse ever until he saw the news story. In case it wasn't immediately obvious, yes, this occurred in Vermont, because where else would this be a problem? Canada is where else it could be a problem, but dang. Just dang. I had a student who told me he was going to miss one of the exams because he was visiting a famous rapper in Florida with his family. He told me that the rapper, who at the time was a relatively big deal, all over the radio, was his cousin and his family was flying out for a show and he couldn't skip it. I mean, I would have let him make up the exam anyway. I don't really care as long as he takes it. But all his peers and I were kind of like, yeah, right, okay, whatever you say, man. He was telling the truth. When he got back from Florida, said famous rapper Skyped into our poetry class and chatted with my students about poetry and lyrics and such. It was actually really cool. That sounds great. Not a teacher, but a fellow student in my grad program last week. Sorry, I have to go. I just got a notification that my TV fell on my cat. One time my teacher's dog ate my homework. Since she thought it was unfair for me to redo a long assignment, she gave me full credit based on the benefit of the doubt. This happened to me too. I was doing a project for history and wanted to be extra and made it look like an old Timmy handwritten letter and used coffee and soy sauce to recreate that burned message in a bottle type of look. Of course that dang dog ate my project. Who doesn't love soy sauce? Not me, but a friend. Substitute teaching for a day. Walks into class. Hi, I am your teacher for the day. I am told you have homework. Can you hand it in now please? Student raises hand. I don't have my homework. Teacher, and why is that? Student, we weren't given homework. Teacher, oh yes you were. Student, nope. Teacher gets angry about how she knows they were given homework and just because she was a new teacher didn't mean that they can walk over her. Different teacher walks in. Turned out the sub-teacher was in the wrong classroom. I think that everyone shared a laugh at this one. It seems perfectly innocent, honestly. I was the student my friend had to use for an excuse. So me and my best friend had a project due in science, and my mom went into labor about 4 that morning. I spent the day at the hospital, not school. When the teacher yelled at him for not having the project because it was on my computer, he just said to her nonchalantly, his mom is in labor, it's on his computer. I was told the look on her face was priceless. Not a teacher, but my dog literally ate my homework in high school. I had to read The Great Gatsby in English and I remember my teacher asking me where my copy of the book was. I told him my dog ate it and he gave me that really, bro look. Took out the completely destroyed copy and the expression on his face when he realized I wasn't lying was priceless. I was the student. My grandparents were driving me to school and my neighbor's cow got out of their field, completely blocking the road. Because cows are stubborn and it took us forever to help my neighbor get the cow back in, I was late. Knowing my teacher was a dong, my grandma came down to the class with me to let him know what happened. He didn't believe her. I still can't wrap my head around a teacher at a school in a small farming town didn't believe I was late because a cow was blocking the road. Cows are fake moose. I was looking through the assignments that students handed in and I noticed that one was missing. I talked to the student and asked him why he didn't have his homework and he said, my dog ate it. I asked him, really, and he stared at me with a straight face. So I called his mother. It turns out that his dog actually did eat his homework. Alright, this only barely applies because I didn't hear it directly, but it's a fun story so I'm going to tell it anyway. There was a teacher who taught college English as a second language classes. She had a student who asked if he could have an extension on his paper. She declined. Turns out, His family living in another country was imprisoned because his dad was a journalist who wrote a scathing article about the current regime. He missed class for a few days, during which he flew to his home country, rescued his mom and sister from prison and flew them back, and he still turned in the paper on time. What a badass. A student asked a fellow instructor if he could go home on leave because his dog died. The instructor told him no and gave him the generic speech on how he'd miss a lot of things in the military during his career. Yada yada. The student had a meltdown and was sent to task to our boss, a master chief, and explained the full story. Apparently this guy's parents and siblings all died several years before in an auto accident, and the dog was his only remaining family. He lived with other relatives afterward, but still, the chain of command followed up on the story. It was true, and we sent him home on leave. We started using that as a cautionary tale for new instructors, telling them to be sympathetic when mentoring a student, because you never know what they've been through and a little empathy can make a big difference. More people need to understand this. For example, when the family cat died, I ended up being so upset that I got sick and had to take a couple of days off work. We got the cat after my dad died when I was a kid, and he was the only thing that pulled me out of a near catatonic state. If we hadn't gotten him, I think my life now would be very different. Obligatory, not a teacher but someone I went to school with who was late a lot, came in one day talking about how he was watching the news. Yeah right, David. And why exactly were you watching the news? Some plane had just flown into a building in New York. My where were you moment is sitting in social studies class listening to a kid tell the most obvious lie he had ever told, only for it to be the truth. When I was a HS student, we had classwork and homework on the first day. My teacher claimed to have never received them from me, and I was like, look saint, the attendance. I was there, wouldn't you remember someone not doing their work on the first day? She just said she didn't have it, despite people who don't even like me vouching for me. I redid the assignments and 3 months later she returned my original assignments by having kids pass it to me. I sat at the back. She never apologized or anything. I was the student in this case. I was a new driver, headed to school at the crack of dawn to take an AP exam. For those not familiar, attendance is critical for these exams and you absolutely must show up on time or call the exam proctors to let them know you're going to be late. This was also Central Texas in the middle of May, which is prone to torrential downpours. So, being a new driver, I didn't want to take the highway, so I'd just take a little farm to market road every day and figured it'd be fine. It was not. It was backed up to all heck because a portion of the road had flooded, but Texans being Texans, people were still crossing anyway. So a 15-minute commute became 35. I'd failed to write down the proctor's numbers, so I had no way to let them know I was going to be late. I got to the parking lot about 10 minutes after it was supposed to start. It had been raining so hard and the parking lot had such poor drainage that there was at least 6 inches of water covering the ground, and horizontal rain. Even with my umbrella, I walked into that exam soaked from mid-thigh all the way down, my shoes making a squish, squish, squish noise with every step. Exam proctor, why are you late? Me, sorry, the road was flooded. I had to swim through the parking lot. I was at least able to take the exam, though I was freezing. And before anyone jumps on me, yes, I now know how dumb it is to walk or drive through a flooded area, but high school me didn't. Student here, school actually told my father that it was wrong to teachers to lie, but it was true. My brother and I were late to school because our neighbor's pot-bellied pig escaped and we had to help them catch it. Also not a teacher, sorry, but one time while cycling to school, my sister's school bag fell off and into a creek and I went wading into the water to get it out. Arrived in class with no shoes and wet socks and pants drained to my knees, but the teacher straight up didn't believe me anyway. That's unfair and sad. My friend got his 2 front teeth knocked out while play fighting with his dad, and the teacher called him a liar in front of the class and then had to apologize to him, his dad, and the whole class the next day. Damn it. I have a cousin who went to his math class and turned in his homework without any proof showing he worked on the problem. When asked why he didn't show his work, he responded with, "A NASA rocket scientist showed me a better way." Well, no one believes him, until they called his dad and he had to explain they had a family friend from out of town staying at their house, and yes, he was actually a NASA rocket scientist. Not a teacher, but I got a frog stuck in my printer just before I was going to print an assignment. This was before email submitted assignments were standard. Got an extra day because the professor had never gotten that excuse. Also, HP sent me a new printer. I'm not a teacher, but I once arrived late to class because I had walked on some fresh cement and my right leg went knee deep inside. I had to go back home and wash everything up quickly with a lot of water. The secretary cracked up when I told her what happened. Or you could have carried the cement with you for extra credibility. I specifically remember one time my dog actually ate my sister's homework, and she brought in pieces of the shredded homework. My mom even caught the dog in the act, and got pictures of him. Show us. TC, my mom wouldn't help me with my homework. My brother said she is taking drugs. We splashed water on her but it didn't work. Elementary teacher here. I had a student tell me that her mom got mad and ripped up her homework. Naturally I didn't believe her. Weeks later at a parent conference, a mom actually admitted doing so out of spite because the two had gotten into an argument and that she hoped it went against her grade. From then on I believed the student. For the remainder of the year she tried her best to turn it in. On occasion I would receive the shreds of what was left of her completed homework. She got a pass for the rest of the school year, whether it was turned in or not. I was the student. In high school we had different start times, 7:20 or 8:20. I was walking to school around 8 and on the sidewalk right next to the campus, a cop stopped me and put me in the back of the car for truancy. She drove around looking for others and picked one other person up. That person happened to be attending the adult school, likely for getting grays, across the street. I missed my first 2 classes. Mini unit on Lizzie Borden. That sounds weird, but it was part of a news investigative reporting unit for a journalism elective I teach. Student told me she was having trouble focusing on the lesson because her dad is an axe murderer, so it was bringing up a lot of memories and feelings. Googled his name and yep, she wasn't lying. Not a teacher, but someone in my class came in at 10:45 am, 2 hours late, because they thought that was when school started. The teacher was like, "You're just making excuses." But then a kid on one of the computers checked the school website, and sure enough, it read 10:45 14:45. I was sent to the office to tell the principal, "Hey, apparently school starts at 10:45 now. Is that a typo?" Luckily for us, she was not very strict and it was fixed within a few minutes. Oh, and the kid wasn't considered late and actually stayed 2 extra hours to make up for the lost time. Luckily that's not the worst possible outcome, so far so good I guess. When I was in my first year of my second university degree I got called in for plagiarism. The assignment I had handed in had similar phrasing to another assignment. The kicker was that the other assignment was written by me at my last degree, but back then I had my maiden name, whereas since then I changed to my married name. Took a lot of effort to finally prove that this wasn't intentional plagiarism. I just phrased my sentences like this in all my assignments. I was the student. My mother was in a fire in 2008 and in the moment afterwards, I forgot my book bag being taken to school. My 6th grade teacher lashed into me about why I didn't have my bag, and I just said I think my mom might be dead. She sent me to the principal's office for being a liar. The principal sent me back to class and we had a substitute for a week. Teacher was a lot more chill and apologetic towards me afterwards. Danny was late. Again. Danny was often late, though he always showed up with a dumb smile on his face at some point, usually right in the middle of an important diagram or figure. I finally asked if anyone had seen Danny. Should I mention they had all been very quiet this morning? I didn't say anything rude. I just asked where he was, and if anyone had seen him or knew when he would decide to show up. Can anyone guess the answer? Yes, you got it. Danny was dead. He had been involved in a drunk driving incident the night before and was dead. I was stunned and the kids all looked at me the way a Swiss watchmaker looks at a jam smear on a cafe table. The tone of my voice had been enough. They were all giving me "what is wrong with you" stares. A thought entered my mind and I couldn't stop it. I managed to change the tone slightly so the phrase "I don't believe that" came out almost as a statement of shock, not distrust. There was a pause, and then they all sort of settled back into their seats and I just kept teaching and finished the class. At the break, once the kids had left, I called the office, angry and confused, and wanted to know what had happened and why I hadn't been told. We were told there would be a meeting after school, and not to make any comments for the rest of the day. Hella awkward day followed. That afternoon at the meeting, we, 7 teachers, and a few admin were discussing what had happened, the limited details, and how we should begin thinking about an assembly acknowledgement once the parents had disclosed the facts. As we are sitting there talking about how we had all made some gaffe or other and come off as insensitive, guess who comes into the office? Danny comes in on crutches with his dad, and is promptly shown into the meeting. From the looks around the table, I wasn't the only one confused as heck. The principal simply said, "We thought you were dead." His usual arrogance nowhere to be found. Danny says, "Well, I was. Kinda." He had died during the crash, technically, and been resuscitated. His doctors told him to rest, but he insisted on coming in so no one would worry about him. He wanted to ask if, when he was better, he could be part of an anti-drinking and driving assembly. For the rest of the year he was a model student, on time every day and always there to help staff or fellow students. He healed fully and by the end of the year was the valedictorian. I am 100% convinced that his speech at the assembly contributed to a safer grad that year. Sometimes I muse that I was right, and he wasn't dead, but more times than not, I just marvel at the wonder that is humanity. Row. My cat ate my little brother's maths folder. Literally, he just eats paper and everything because he is a dumbass. My brother took my mom and the folder plus a video of them watching my cat eat it to the teacher to make him believe it. Now all my art supplies are stacked away in closet drawers with these kids' safety locks on them because he's able to open drawers and doors, etc. Also had to put one of them on the fridge. I was a student, so this girl in my class never turned in her homework. Every day she would say that she didn't have it. This happens over for half a year already, and that's when my teacher gets fed up and says, "Okay, where is your homework? Ever since the beginning of the year you haven't turned in your homework, and you don't even bother checking to look for it." The girl replies, "I never have it because my mom always burns them." We all look at her kind of thinking it was bulls. Teacher say to call her mom if it was true. Without hesitation, the girl gets up and calls her mom. Our teacher tells us to always have it on speaker mode every time we call, so we heard everything. The mom answers and tells her if anything happened. Girl says she is fine, that nothing is happening. Then she asked her, "Mom, every day you clean out my backpack and burn some of my papers along with your trash, right?" Her mother says, "Yay, I burn most of your paperwork." "Okay mom, thanks." Girl hangs up and sits back down. We all just started laughing. The teacher had kind of an annoyed look on her face. Some weird excuse, but it wasn't bulls. Don't know if she still burns her stuff anymore now. That's so sad. Poor girl. Not a teacher but a student. The first day of school this year, me and basically all the other kids got at our bus stop at about 8:25, 8:35, and school starts at 9 BTW. And the bus was about an hour and a half late. So all of us missed the entirety of our first period, and our first period teachers had to rush to give us our back to school forms about insurance and medical and privacy stuff. I have a condition where I get really violent hiccups, so I've had to email a professor to say I couldn't come to class due to the hiccups. It feels so lame, but they're really super loud to the point where no one would be able to learn anything. Oh, those suck. I get hiccups that hurt like a mofo. They sound like a combo of hiccups and burps and hit hard. I was the student here. I couldn't make it to class because I was locked in our apartment. I had tossed my keys in my mom's bag the day before and forgot to take them back out. And when my mom left for work half an hour before I had to leave, she locked the door behind her and left. Teacher did believe me though. I guess my reason for not coming was so stupid it couldn't have been made up. This happened to me at work a few years ago. I took a Snapchat and sent it to my assistant manager. It was just stuck. I was able to call down to a neighbor from my balcony about 20 minutes later, and with her pushing and me pulling finally got the sucker open. I was the student. My senior year, I had the hardest time with my English teacher. She would be out for a week and come back and say I hadn't turned in my work when I knew I had. Found out later that the substitute, whom we oh so affectionately called Frankenstein, was holding on to my papers because I had given him a hard time my junior year in choir. I was a vocal captain in the show choir, and we had to go over notes, but he hated the sound of the piano, so he wouldn't let me use it. Asked him how he expected us to learn notes without a piano. Led to an argument. He held a grudge. I caught him throwing an assignment away the last time and told my teacher. Took a video as proof. Video was a good move. Well played. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.